Shalom, 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 shalom. Yisrael. This is Yehonatan Dawid with you again, and I'm glad to be here with you. Feeling a little bit more upbeat than last week. Today's show is a tribute to my son, Jay, and this is the follow-up of that show. And I am most happy to be with you here. Last week we talked about, I went through a list of our people who have had ended up under police brutality, most of them being shot. And I wanted to follow up with that, talking about how we engage with in our society as a people and the results of it. And I started off with 1991, Latasha Harlings, 15-year-old young black child who was shot in the back of the head by Soon Ja Du, a Korean woman, shop store owner. But I implore you to hear this whole show and then the follow-up answer to it for next week, because the answer is not an us against them or black and white thing. That is a ruse. That is a ruse. So hear the whole thing. Do not make any judgments, any hatred judgments early. I want to read a quote from Dr. Frances Cress Welsing of what racism is, because we really don't know what racism is. And her definition has been accepted as the definition of it. Racism is white supremacy. It is the local and global power system structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined. This system consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response, as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity. People activity is economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. The ultimate purpose of this system is to prevent white genetic annihilation on Earth, a planet in which the overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white, black, brown, red, and yellow. By white-skinned people, all of the non-white people are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetically recessive white-skinned people. That is the operating definition for racism. That being the case, no non-white person can practice racism. It can only be practiced by the self-acknowledged white people. Now, to be sure that the scriptures do not classify man as being any color. Man is identified by who his father is. So as such, classifying people by a so-called race is a ruse. And I'll talk about that a little bit more next week. But we're going to go by what this definition is based on what they call themselves. I talked last week about the Guardian study. And in that Guardian study, it is the most extensive study on the use of deadly force by law enforcement. We find that in 2015, when the Guardian study came out, 1,134 souls were killed by law enforcement. This is YahwehForChristians.wordpress.com, YahwehForChristians@gmail.com. And I that's important because that's a lot of people. There's only 365 days in a year. Yet you have 1,134 deaths by just law enforcers, people who are paid by taxpayers to uphold the law. I gave some statistics from that study. Please access it because it's very detailed and very telling. For instance, in England and Wales, in that year, they had 55 killings. Actually, 55 killings in 24 years. England and Wales. In the US alone, we've had 15. We've had 59 in the first 24 days. We're talking about people killed under law enforcement only. In the first 24 days, the United States had 59 killed, while England and Wales had 55 in 24 years. Iceland, with a population of 320,000 people, has only had one in its 80-plus year history. And Stockton, California alone, with a population very similar to Iceland, 304,000, they've had 3 in the first 5 months. Germany had 15 killed by law enforcement in 2 years in all categories of peoples. This means 15 people killed in Germany over a 2-year period. All peoples, no matter what race, no matter what conditions, were killed. But in good old US of A and good old America, you've had 19 in the first 5 months killed of unarmed black men. That means in the narrow category of black males and unarmed, and by law enforcement, 19 killed. In Australia, 94 in 19 years, all categories. That means all categories. The broad brush. In the United States, 97 were killed in March alone. In Canada, they average about 24 killed by law enforcement per year. In California alone, in 2015, 72. Almost 3 times as much as the whole country of Canada, what they average a year. Finland is a population of less than 5.5 million people. And this is quite interesting. In Finland, in the year 2013, they used up a total of 6 bullets. Now, that doesn't cause for a big budget in your armory department when for a whole year you only fire 6 bullets. All you need is 1 gun full of bullets. A 6-shooter would have completed your whole armory for the year. But in Pasco, Wisconsin, with a population of 67,599, only a fraction of the population of Finland, against Antonio Zambrano Montez alone, policemen fired off 17 rounds into his body. 17. 3 times more than what the entire police force of Finland did in a whole year. Let's go through some names just in 2015, the year of this study. I was talking to a minister of mine, Minister Dawid Jr., and just off the top of his head, he was able to rattle off a whole lot of names of our souls, our victims who were victimized by police brutality. And he had a whole long list of names. I have them all here, but I did miss one that he remembered. Natasha McKenna. And that was, she was murdered in Fairfax, Virginia in 2015, being crushed by police officers who just would not get off of her. And she ended up dying of cardiac arrest. Now, that's a brutal way of dying. It may have been less harsh just to be shot and killed, but she died of cardiac arrest under the weight of brutal police officers. All this is in 2015. These are just the more celebrated cases of souls that were murdered by police officers. Christian Taylor, Samuel DuBose, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, Walter L. Scott, Jamar Clark, Jeremy McDowell, William Chapman, Walter Scott, Eric Harris, Tony Robinson, Ricky Ball, and we just got finished talking about Natasha McKinney. Of course, there are much more souls than that when you have a total of 1,134 in that year alone. But those cases I just mentioned, I talked about them in more detail last week. YahwehForChristians@wordpress.com, YahwehForChristians@gmail.com. Contact me, and if you want a copy of the CD, or if you want a copy of the book, Yahweh for Christians, I Am Original Words, Original Truth. So what we have here is a country that is bloodthirsty. We're living in a country that's bloodthirsty. No other country on the earth, and they call themselves civilized, kills that many of its citizens, while under the auspices of its law enforcement, who are commanded to uphold the law and to keep the law. No one else. You know, I was reminded last week of a movie called The Human Stain with Anthony Hopkins. In The Human Stain, it is an interesting movie. I implore you to see it. Many symbolic meanings in it, very layered, that I'm not going to be able to bring all out even now. But in The Human Stain, Anthony Hopkins plays a black man who, in order to be successful in the world, played himself as a Jew, because he was very light, fair complexion, and he was able to get away through life as a Jew. As the story goes on, he had 3 loves, but ultimately the one that loved him was the only one he told that he was a black man. Bottom line, in this movie, it really shows you who is the true human stain. Is it the Jew? Or is it the black man? This movie answers that question. The one who's hated above all men is the so-called black man, not the Jew. Because when he was a Jew, everything was okay. When he was a black man, it was not. Yet he was the same man. Next week, I implore you to tune in to Yahweh for Christians at WordPress.com to talk about the Hebrew Manifesto, because this is deeper than a so-called black and white. Do not get caught up in the net that they give you. It's a net of lies, of pitting one person against another based on superficiality reasons. But when my political ire was roused back in 1991 with Latasha Harlins out there with candles, walking around the block, and we shall overcome, and crying and singing and praying. Here we are, 2019, nothing has changed. Because the one who has set down the blueprint for the world that we live in is not in fear of your marching, of your political franchise, because they laid down the laws of all that. Everything that we go by, whatever we go by to fight against whatever injustice we see, we go by the blueprint that's given us. As such, the end result would not be what you want. You cannot win. If so, why are we here in 2019 with you still having your son's blood roll down in the streets? You do not control the economics of your life. If you paid off your house today, you will be paying someone who does not look like you to stay there. You, until you die, will be paying money to someone who does not look like you because of his rules and his laws. And even in your own house, you cannot do what you want to do because you don't own nothing. You run nothing but your mouth. That's what you run. Because everything you walk on belongs to somebody else. You do not control the educational system. You cannot take your child out of the educational system. If you do in homeschool, there are laws and rules on that. You have free education because you are compelled to believe what you are told to believe, what you are wanted to believe. And when you believe that and you disagree, you get a permit to tell them you don't agree. And when all this, the crying and mourning and fussing and we should overcoming is done, when the camera's no longer rolling, and you buried another son, and they kill a lot of women too. In that list, there's a lot of women. You're still where you are. You have not moved. You do not control anything. You do not control your entertainment. Any of these people you idolize must follow the rule, or they will not sell a record or whatever it is they sell now, CDs, DVD, I don't know. They will not get a line in the movies. They will get nothing. They will not sell a book. They don't toe the line. You do not control the labor. If you should own your own business and have people work for you, you will follow the laws and rules of your own company based on the blueprint given you. You do not control any laws. When you go into court before the man, it'll be based on whatever violation you made of his laws that he is going to interpret and adjudicate for you. Remember, I told you last week that Judge Joyce Carlin went against the recommendations of the jury, who said that Soon Jon Do should get 16 years for killing Latasha Hollins, blowing the back of her brains out on camera. And without remorse during the entire process. They said this woman needs and 16 years is not enough. She should be in jail as long as Hollins is dead. That's what should happen. She said that not only, this is Judge Hollins, that not only was Soon Jon Do innocent, she just said she had to pay for the funeral, but that had Latasha, little 15-year-old Latasha, lived, Latasha would be in her court for assault. Can you believe that? She would be in her court for assault. I mean, I almost want to cry just from reading that. Because the worst person on the earth is you. You are the human stain. Psalm 22:6. The Messiah, Yahweh Shua, who died for you on a tree, says, I am a worm and no man, a reproach of men and despised by the people. When he says, I am a worm, you don't get the full impact of what that means. That worm is a stain. Your Savior said that he is a stain. They used that worm to stain. It was a red blood worm. And that's what you are, a stain. If the way you choose to fight the system continues to be what it is, you will continue to be no different than what Emmett Till was. The tenets of this program, this show, is not to be like any other show. My heart is to put into your heart and your mind to wake up and look at another way of dealing with the injustices are against you as a person and as us as a people. And it is not the way you're doing it now. What happened to Emmett Till? That was way back in 1955. And we still haven't gotten it right. We still have over 1,000 people, non-white people, killed per year by law enforcement because of a system. Because of a system. A system where the liar says she lied just in the shadows of her death. And the two men who on it in an interview in Look magazine admitted to what they did to him, but because of the statute of limitations, no charges were against them. And again, this is not just a black-white thing, though you are the human thing. If it was solely black and white, then O.J. Simpson would have been arrested, because you cannot write a book, if I had done it, this is how I would have done it, and then not get arrested. So this is a system that is evil, a system that is bad. Do not say I'm some white bashing white hater. I hate people who lie. And I hate them with a perfect hatred, no matter what your so-called race is. You read the story of Emmett Till, it is no different than 2019. Why? Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have some emotion stirred up and do something meaningful with it. Let's go ahead and read the letter that can be written today from Willie Lynch. And Willie Lynch, the slave owner who wrote this letter way back in 1712 to tell the people in power how to stay in power and to keep you where you are, marching and trying to overcome. Gentlemen, I greet you here on the banks of the James River in the year of our Lord, 1712. And that's your problem, because you're in here in the year of your Lord in 2019, calling the same man that he called on for your deliverance. Back to Willie Lynch. That's the right name for him, Lynch. Back to his letter. First, I shall, and I hate that word shall, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I'm here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves. Your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and still the oldest methods for control of slaves. Ancient Rome would envy us if my program is implemented. As our boat sails south on the James River, named for our illustrious king, that's the book you love, your King James Bible, whose version of the Bible we cherish. When will you learn? Please listen to this humble servant right now. That's me. Please listen to me. And stop co-signing on this man whose last name is Lynch, co-signing on his Lord and his book that he cherishes, the King James. Back to his letter. I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique. While Rome used cords of wood as crosses for standing human bodies along its old highways in great numbers, you are here using the tree and the rope on occasion. I caught the whip of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock by hangings, you are having uprising. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the fields too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasions, fires, your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I am not here to enumerate your problems. However, I'm here to introduce you to a method of solving them. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method of controlling your black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your overseer can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple little list of differences and think about them. On top of my list is age, but it is there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. There is intelligence, size, sex, size plantation, status on plantations, attitudes of owners, whether the slaves live in the valley or in the hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action. But before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy is stronger than adulation. respect, or admiration. The black slave, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black, and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slave versus the light-skinned slave, and the light-skinned slave versus the dark-skinned slave. You must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks. But it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Thank you, gentlemen. Willie Lynch. William Lynch. He was a prophet. He's a prophet. Because here today, what's this? January 13th, in the year of your Lord 2019, you're still shooting each other. You shot more people in Chicago alone than all that died in war during the Bush years. You're killing one another. You're hating one another for their hair, for their skin tone. You're in fear of the white man. Your women coddle the men. Everything that he said is true. Everything he said was whipped into you. They took your mothers and whipped your fathers in front of the pregnant mother. So in the womb, the mothers instill fear into the child because the child's father is being whipped in front of them. They did buck busting. That means they bent your fathers over, spread them apart, and raped them in front of their pregnant wives. But you still want to march and exercise your franchise to vote. You're going to vote yourself out of that. You're still using that same, or you're like trying to use an 8-track today. You're a stupid people. And that comes from the book. I told you that on week 1 of my show. You're stupid. If you're going to keep on trying to use their ways of getting out of your condition, you're stupid. You want a way to get out of it? Then tune in next week. Because even in their Bible, Luke 6:31 tells you the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So you would want your daughter to be shot in the back of her head and have the shooter absolved of anything, just pay for her funeral costs? Is that what you would do? Would you have your son dragged through the streets and beaten up and thrown in the bottom of a river with a cotton gin created by Eli Whitney? Eli, my mighty one, is white. That's what Eli Whitney's name means. He made the machine for you to be better in picking cotton. Wake up, people. My last scripture, as you hear the music go, 2 Samuel 23, 3, 6, and 7. And it states, he that rules over man must be just. But the sons of rebellion will all be as thorns thrust away, because they cannot be taken with hands. But the man who touches them must be armed with iron, and will be a great and a spear, and they will be utterly burned with fire in their place. That's who will give you amelioration. That man, not you. Toda Yah, until next week. This is Yahonatan Dawid. Shalom, shalom. I did. Okay. learned that, but for some reason, I couldn't even record it up here, and now it didn't even get recorded over here. But you can release that one, and then release the last one that was recorded on my phone.
Okay.